So I want to start with a statistic that just completely floored me when I read our source material for today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so in 2024, an estimated 138 million children are still engaged in forced child labor globally.
Right. It's a massive number.
It really is. And I mean, 54 million of those kids are doing hazardous work, like
Mm.
mining or heavy manufacturing, dangerous agriculture.
Yeah, the really brutal stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yet, if you look at the broad statistical data from the notes we're unpacking today, we are currently living in one of the most successful eras of moral progress in the history of human civilization.
Which just sounds so contradictory, right?
It completely sounds like a contradiction. How can both of those things possibly be true at the exact same time?
It feels like a total paradox, I know. But holding those two realities side by side, the suffering and the progress, is really the only way to actually understand how human morality evolves.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because today, for you, the listener, we are doing a deep dive into an incredibly thought-provoking set of notes titled Justice.
Yeah, and we are going to explore what is arguably civilization's absolute hardest climb.
Right, like how humanity actually identifies its own moral failures and the literal physical mechanics of how we attempt to correct them.
Because justice is not proof that humanity is naturally or inherently good.
Wow. Okay, pause there. That's a huge claim.
It is, but it's true. If anything, justice is proof that humanity can learn.
Right, we can learn from our massive mistakes.
Exactly. That distinction is the bedrock of everything we're going to unpack in this deep dive.
Because if we were naturally good, we wouldn't need all these rules.
Right. If we were just universally benevolent, we wouldn't need complex legal frameworks or, constitutional rights or labor laws.
Right, just do the right thing automatically.
Yeah, but we don't. The mere existence of these systems proves our default state is deeply, deeply flawed.
So think about early human society as an operating system.
I like this analogy.
Yeah, let's call it Civilization OS version 1.0. And let's be honest, this operating system shipped with catastrophic bugs.
Oh, massive one. System crashing bugs.
Right. We're talking about systemic, civilization-wide features that today we view as absolute moral horrors.
Things like slavery.
Yes, slavery or absolute exclusion based on gender or race,
Mm.
and just the raw, violent domination of the weak by the strong.
It was a system where physical power was literally the only metric that mattered.
Exactly. Imagine reading the user agreement for, like, 14th century Europe.
That would be a terrifying document.
Right. It would say, by being born a peasant, you agreed to surrender all your crop yields, you waive your right to a fair trial, and you accept a 40% chance of dying from a localized tooth infection. Click accept.
And the kicker is you couldn't click decline.
Right. There was no opt-out button.
There wasn't. That was the baseline reality. For the vast majority of human history, the law didn't protect human dignity at all.
What did it protect then?
It protected property, and it protected hierarchy.
Wow. Okay, so if society is this highly buggy operating system, justice is basically the ongoing, grueling release of patch notes.
Yes, I love that. Patch notes for humanity.
It's humanity finding a bug. Like, hey, maybe hereditary privilege is actually a terrible, inefficient way to distribute societal resources.
Or maybe giving a monarch absolute power to execute people on a whim is causing massive system crashes.
Exactly. And then society tries to write a legal patch to fix it.
Right.
But the question that immediately comes up for me when reading this is why? Why are we uniquely wired to even care about these patches?
What's fascinating here is that the source material actually addresses that directly.
Right, because if the strong are winning and they write the rules, why not just accept the bugs as features? Why change anything?
Because humans possess a profound, hardwired sensitivity to unfairness.
Like biologically.
Yes, biologically and psychologically. We are deeply sensitive to it. We aren't just seeking bare minimum biological survival.
We have more than just food and shelter.
Exactly. We are a species that actively desires recognition, respect, and a coherent moral order.
So it's an evolutionary thing, right? Like it helped us survive in the past.
Very much so. Evolutionary psychologists point out that reciprocal altruism is key to human survival.
Reciprocal altruism, meaning I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Right. We survived in tribes by trusting each other. And when that trust is violated, when a system is inherently unfair, it triggers a deep psychological alarm in our brains.
Oh, that reminds me of that monkey experiment.
Yes, the famous behavioral experiment with the capuchin monkeys.
Okay, I have to explain this for you, the listener, because it's so funny and so revealing. So they take two monkeys in adjacent cages, right?
Yep, side by side.
And if you give both monkeys cucumbers for doing a simple task, they're both perfectly happy. They eat the cucumber, everyone's chilling.
Right, it's fair compensation.
But then, if you suddenly give one monkey a high-value reward like a grape and continue giving the other one a cucumber for the exact same task,
Which the second monkey can see happening.
right, they're watching this blatant wage gap happen in real time. The second monkey will look at the cucumber, look at the researcher, and literally throw the cucumber back at their face in a rage.
They start shaking the cage, too. It's an incredible reaction.
So the monkey recognizes the systemic inequality.
Exactly. The primate brain recognizes when power or reward is distributed arbitrarily.
That is wild.
It is. And in humans, that capacity for moral discomfort is exponentially more complex.
Because we have, like, abstract thought and legal codes.
Right. It's what allows us to look at a legal framework that has been completely normalized for centuries and say out loud, this system benefits me, but it is fundamentally wrong.
It's the capacity to step outside the water we are swimming in.
Precisely.
And to you, listening right now, I want to point something out about this, because I think it's so relevant.
Oh, definitely.
That deep-seated biological sensitivity to unfairness. That is exactly why you get so incredibly frustrated and exhausted when you're scrolling through the news.
It really is.
It's so easy to fall into a doom scroll spiral and feel your blood pressure spike when you see corruption or inequity.
Because your brain is treating it like a threat to the tribe.
Right. That outrage you feel isn't a malfunction. It's your unfairness detector firing off. It's a feature, not a bug.
And it's a necessary feature. It is the very engine of moral discomfort that forces society to write the next patch note.
Wow. I love that. Without that discomfort, we just stay broken.
Exactly. Without it, the status quo remains permanently frozen. The ability to ask, what is right, instead of just, who is strongest, is the mechanism that transitions us away from version 1.0.
Okay, so let's talk about version 1.0 in more detail. Because to understand how far we've climbed, we really have to look down at the historical baseline.
We do, and it is bleak.
Yeah, reading the notes, I was just shocked by how bleak it was for so long.
Bleak is almost too generous a word, honestly. When we look at the historical data, for thousands of years, your physical safety, your fundamental rights, everything.
Basically, your access to any form of legal protection.
Right. It all depended entirely on the lottery of your birth. Your safety depended on not being poor, not being enslaved, female, disabled, or part of a colonized population.
Which is like the vast majority of the human race.
Exactly. The vast majority of people had no safety net.
So you had no intrinsic value to the state. Your value was just totally circumstantial.
Completely circumstantial. We accepted forced labor, rigid caste systems, serfdom, debtor prisons, and public executions as perfectly normal features of a functioning society.
Just everyday life.
Right. That was just how the world worked.
So how do we start measuring the climb out of that? Like, when does the paradigm actually shift from circumstantial value to intrinsic human value?
A massive mechanical shift occurs in the mid-20th century. If we want to look at a specific pivot point, the source highlights the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Oh, in 1948.
Yes, 1948.
Let's hover on 1948 for a second. Because it's so easy to just cite a document and a year and move on. But the mechanics of how that document came to be are fascinating.
They really are. It was a completely unprecedented moment in history.
We're looking at the immediate aftermath of World War II. I mean, the ashes are literally still settling.
The world was in shock.
Yeah. The world has just witnessed industrial-scale genocide, the deployment of atomic weapons, and just the total collapse of the international order.
The baseline had reached its most technologically destructive extreme. We had used our new tech to maximize the old bugs of version 1.0.
Right, exactly. And the international community, led by figures like Eleanor Roosevelt, attempted to do something that had literally never been done on a global scale.
They tried to legally codify what a human being is fundamentally owed.
Which just sounds so basic now. But back then, getting different cultures, religions, and political systems to agree on what constitutes a right must have been a logistical nightmare.
Oh, it was.
You have Soviet delegates, Western capitalist delegates, representatives from newly post-colonial nations.
All sitting in a room trying to define justice.
Yeah, trying to agree on the patch notes.
It was a grueling philosophical and legal battle. But the resulting mechanism, the Declaration, was revolutionary.
Because it applied to everyone, right?
Yes. It argued that rights belong to people simply by virtue of being human.
Not because of their citizenship or their class or their gender.
Exactly, just their humanity. It was the first time the global operating system attempted to install a universal baseline.
And this brings us back to the child labor statistic. I opened the show with declaring something on paper and enforcing it in reality are two entirely different things.
They are very different, which is why we have to look at the trajectory, not just a snapshot.
Right, the long-term trend.
You mentioned the 138 million children still in forced labor in 2024. That is a horrifying reality.
It is. It makes you feel like nothing has changed.
But the context required to understand that number, the context the source material gives us, is that it represents a drop of over 100 million children since the year 2000.
Wait, really? Over 100 million kids pulled out of exploitative labor.
Yes.
In just roughly 2 decades.
Exactly. In less than a quarter of a century. That is what measurable mechanical progress looks like. It does not erase the ongoing tragedy, obviously, but it mathematically proves that the trajectory of human suffering can be altered by coordinated legal and social effort.
Okay, I hear that, and the drop in child labor is undeniable. That is amazing. But I'm going to push back here for a second.
Go for it.
Because if we are talking about trajectories, we have to look at recent data too.
Fair enough.
The source notes brought up the World Justice Project's 2025 Rule of Law Index, which measures things like constraints on government power, corruption, fundamental rights, and civil justice across 143 countries.
Yes, it's a very comprehensive index.
And their 2025 report showed that the rule of law actually declined in 68% of the countries measured.
That's right.
So what does this all mean? If things are actively declining in over 2/3 of the world right now, just last year, can we really honestly call this an upward climb?
It's a tough pill to swallow.
Are we sure we aren't just putting a positive historical spin on a losing battle?
It is a vital question. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the decline isn't a refutation of the progress. It's actually a demonstration of how the mechanics of justice function.
How so? It sounds like a failure of the mechanics.
Because justice is not a trophy. We didn't win it in 1948, put it on a shelf, and get to admire it forever without doing any work.
Right, it's not self-sustaining.
Exactly. It requires constant, exhausting maintenance.
So it's not an escalator. You don't just stand on it and ride it to a utopian future while scrolling on your phone.
No, not at all. It's a steep mountain face. The decline in the 2025 index proves the source's point. Rights only survive when they are actively defended.
Because there's always a force pushing back.
Always. When populations become complacent or when democratic institutions are weakened by internal division, the system slides backward. Gravity always pulls toward authoritarianism and the consolidation of power.
Wow. Gravity pulls toward authoritarianism. That makes a lot of sense. The default state of the OS wants to reassert itself.
Exactly. The natural resting state of power is to accumulate more power.
Which brings us to the most important question.
Which is?
If progress isn't guaranteed and requires constant defense against backsliding, and if power naturally wants to consolidate, who is doing the defending?
That is the core of the issue.
Right. How does a society actually force these improvements into existence? Because no one in power wakes up one morning and says, you know what? I have way too much unchecked authority today. Let me just draft some legal limits on my own wealth and power.
That has literally never happened. Progress is never freely given by the powerful. It has to be demanded.
As to be wrestled away.
Yes. It is argued, litigated, marched for, and fiercely defended.
So it takes an entire ecosystem of reform.
Exactly. Empathy is where it starts, but a critical philosophical point from the source is that empathy alone is fundamentally useless against entrenched power.
Wait, empathy is useless? I thought compassion was the whole point of justice.
Empathy is the spark, but a spark doesn't power an engine.
Oh, I see.
If you feel terrible for someone who is being exploited, your compassion does absolutely nothing to stop the exploitation. Good intentions have to become institutions.
You have to become structural.
Yes. Compassion must be aggressively translated into tangible structures. Things like laws, courts, investigative journalism, compliance standards.
So it goes from a feeling to a rule.
Right. A just society isn't one where no harm occurs because harm will always occur, but one where harm can be named and systematically repaired.
Okay, let's break down how that translation actually happens, because the notes use the disability rights movement to illustrate this, and I think it perfectly shows this exact mechanism, how a feeling becomes a framework.
It's a phenomenal example because up until the late 20th century, the prevailing framework for disability was the medical model.
Which essentially viewed disability as a personal tragedy.
Yes, a personal defect and a matter of private charity.
Right. Society's stance was basically, We feel bad for you, so we will build special asylums or maybe offer charitable donations.
It was entirely rooted in pity, not justice.
And the mechanical shift happened when the disability rights movement completely reframed accessibility.
They rejected the charity model entirely.
And they introduced the social model of disability, which basically argued that people aren't disabled by their bodies. They're disabled by a society that refuses to build an environment they can navigate.
Exactly. They shifted it from a medical issue to a civil rights issue.
And that is where the empathy translates into mechanics. Because you look at the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990.
The ADA.
Yeah, it wasn't just a declaration that we should be nice to disabled people. It was a brutal, hard-fought legislative mandate.
People fought incredibly hard for it.
Right. Activists literally crawled up the steps of the U.S. Capitol, the famous Capitol crawl, to visually demonstrate the barrier that architecture created.
It was a brilliant physical demonstration of the problem.
And the resulting law mechanically forced businesses to change. It legally required curb cuts, braille on ATM machines, elevator access, widened doorways.
That is the transition from intention to institution. The ADA allowed a private citizen to sue a massive corporation to force them to build a ramp.
That is making power answerable.
Yes.
I was thinking about this, and it's kind of like a highly complex relay race.
A relay race.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture how all these sociological forces cooperate to get a law like that passed. The starting gun of the race is the marginalized group themselves.
Okay, I follow.
Right, the people actually experiencing the harm, the workers in the dangerous factory, or the citizens facing discrimination. They have to tell the truth about what is happening.
Yes, because without the testimony of the vulnerable, the harm remains completely invisible to the broader society.
But their testimony isn't enough on its own.
No, because power will just ignore them.
Exactly. So they have to pass the baton to the next runner. The journalists, the researchers, the documentarians.
The ones who can amplify the message.
Right. This group takes the raw testimony, investigates it, and exposes the hard, undeniable evidence to the public.
They create the societal outrage necessary to force the issue onto the agenda.
But outrage doesn't write laws. So the journalist passes the baton to the reformers and the lawyers.
The institutional translator.
Yes. They take all that raw evidence and that public anger, and they translate it into the dry, complex language of legal arguments. They figure out how to write the actual patch notes.
They translate moral discomfort into institutional reform.
Exactly. And then the final leg of the race, the citizens. The public has to put relentless pressure on the institutions to enforce the rules, cross the finish line.
Victims to journalists to lawyers to citizens.
It's an immense chain of custody. And if any one of those runners drops the baton, if the media looks away, if the lawyers get bought out, if the public gets distracted, the reform completely fails.
Which highlights how precarious progress really is. And we should note, purely from a historical standpoint, as the source points out, this is how all major civil rights and labor movements have functioned.
Right, across the board.
It's not about endorsing specific modern political factions. It's about understanding the mechanical process of expanding accountability. The people driving this aren't abstract philosophers. They are real people taking immense personal risks.
Like whistleblowers destroying their careers to expose corporate fraud.
Or workers risking their livelihoods to organize a union.
Or journalists facing prison to expose state corruption.
It's a massive, risky endeavor.
It's a miracle it ever works at all. But that actually brings us to a really difficult psychological paradox that the text dives into.
The psychology of outrage.
Yeah. Because if we have this incredible multi-generational relay race of institutions constantly working to fix society, why are we all so stressed out?
It's a very valid question.
Why, as the text asks, does it often feel like everything is failing? Why does everyone feel so utterly defeated right now?
Because of the psychology of how human beings perceive progress.
Okay, tell me more about that.
The reality is that progress becomes completely invisible the exact moment it succeeds.
Invisible progress. Explain that. How could progress be invisible?
Think about the relay race you just described. Let's say it takes 3 generations of brutal, exhausting struggle to secure a specific protection, like the right to a safe workplace or a protected weekend.
Okay.
The generation that fought for it remembers the blood spilled, they know how hard it was to win, but 2 generations later...
It's just normal.
Right. That hard-won right is just boring background bureaucracy. It's built into the expectation of daily life.
Oh, I see. You don't wake up on a Saturday morning and think, Wow, I am so deeply grateful to the labor organizers of 1886 who bled in the streets so I don't have to work a 14-hour shift today.
No, you just think, great, it's Saturday, I'm going to sleep in.
Right. You don't even think about the fact that it used to be different.
Exactly. You don't notice the thousands of quiet protections preventing harm every day.
Yeah.
You don't notice the building that doesn't collapse because of strict zoning laws.
Or the drinking water that doesn't poison you because of the EPA.
Right. You don't notice the disaster that was prevented. We only notice the system when it fails.
And our brains are practically hardwired to only look for the failures, aren't they?
We have a profound evolutionary bias toward negativity.
The text mentions this, the negativity bias.
Yes. Detecting threats kept our ancestors alive.
Yes.
If you are walking through the jungle and you hear a rustle in the bushes, the humans who assumed it was a tiger survived.
Even if it was just the wind.
Exactly. But the humans who assumed it was just the wind, they got eaten by the tiger.
So we inherited the brains of the paranoid survivor.
Right. Fear and outrage feel urgent. They feel like a fire alarm. Stability and good news feel passive, so we ignore them.
And you combine that biological hardware with the modern algorithmic software of social media, and it's game over.
It intensifies everything.
Because the algorithms optimize for engagement, and nothing drives engagement like an existential threat.
This raises an important question, though, about the difference between productive outrage and fatalistic cynicism.
I'm going to push back on that a bit, actually.
Well,
Isn't the outrage necessary?
Yeah.
We just established that without outrage, without the capuchin monkey throwing the cucumber, the abolitionists don't fight, the workers don't strike, and the relay race never starts.
outrage is absolutely essential. The source is very clear on that. It is the fuel for the engine.
Right.
But outrage, completely divorced from historical perspective, is incredibly dangerous. It creates despair.
How so?
When we only focus on the flaws of the present moment without any understanding of the horrific baseline we climbed out of, we fall into what the text calls reductionist thinking.
Reductionist thinking. Break down how that works in practice.
It's the cognitive trap of looking at an imperfect system and concluding that it is entirely fake.
Like throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly. It's the cynical belief that because corruption still exists, all progress is just an illusion. You hear it all the time. All politicians are equally corrupt, or the legal system is a total joke because rich people still get away with crimes.
Or voting doesn't matter because the system is rigged anyway.
Yes. It's taking a system that is glitching and deciding the entire OS is fundamentally malware.
And the danger of that mindset is that it creates learned helplessness. If you genuinely believe that absolutely nothing ever improves and that all progress is corruption, you just freeze. You stop trying.
Paralysis sets in. And when citizens become paralyzed by cynicism, they drop the baton in the relay race.
And then authoritarianism steps right into the vacuum.
Exactly. It's the ultimate self-fulfilling prophecy.
And it's so easy to fall into. When you see a video of a corrupt judge or a corporation dumping chemicals into a river and paying a tiny fine, the natural instinct is to throw your hands up and say, the whole thing is a scam.
But that is exactly when we need the historical perspective.
Right. And to you listening, I want to say this directly. When you read the news and feel that sense of learned helplessness, remember that a flawed, deeply imperfect labor system where companies occasionally exploit loopholes is still vastly, measurably better than unrestricted child labor in coal mines.
An imperfect, slow-moving court system is infinitely better than a monarch who can execute you for speaking out of turn.
Progress doesn't require perfection to be real. And recognizing that progress isn't an excuse to stop fighting, it's the proof that fighting actually works.
Overcoming this cynicism requires us to look at where our moral imagination is actively expanding right now.
Yes. Let's pivot to that, because this leads perfectly into the next section of the notes, which I found completely fascinating.
The expansion of the moral circle.
Right. We've spent this entire time talking about human-to-human justice, humans fighting humans for rights. But right now, we are applying justice in entirely new ways. We are looking at environmental justice.
It is a profound leap. For thousands of years, the law only asked how humans should treat other humans.
And really only certain humans, property-owning ones mostly.
Exactly. But now, justice has expanded beyond human-to-human courts. The legal systems are being forced to ask, who pays the price when an ecosystem collapses?
When a river is poisoned or the air is rendered toxic. Here's where it gets really interesting. I was trying to find a good way to visualize this. Earlier, I talked about the OS patches, but I was thinking about it like expanding a Wi-Fi network.
Oh, how so?
Historically, the Wi-Fi router only covered one room in the house. Like only property-owning individuals could log on and get legal protection.
Right.
But now, society is trying to push the signal to the entire house, to the backyard, and even to future generations who haven't even logged on yet.
That's a great way to put it. It connects human rights with ecological responsibility.
It extends the network.
Yeah.
And we have concrete proof that this expansion can work on a global scale.
Yes, the text brings up a perfect example, the Montreal Protocol.
The ozone layer fix. I get so enthusiastic talking about this because the data is just wild.
It's an incredible success story. In the 1980s, scientists discovered that chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs,
Which were used in like every refrigerator and aerosol can on Earth at the time.
right, they were literally tearing a hole in the ozone layer. The existential threat was massive.
We're talking increased UV radiation, skyrocketing skin cancer rates, global agricultural collapse.
And the incredible thing about the Montreal Protocol is the mechanics of how they solved it. It wasn't just a bunch of countries saying, we promise to do better.
They created a binding international legal framework that systematically forced industries to phase out these chemicals.
It was a perfectly executed relay race. Scientists sounded the alarm, diplomats wrote the patch notes, and industries were forced to comply.
And the result, I love sharing this stat, nearly 99% of banned ozone-depleting substances have been phased out globally.
99%.
It's almost entirely fixed. The ozone layer is actively healing. It shows that when the system actually aligns, we can solve planetary-scale bugs.
And we are seeing the legal foundation for more of this being laid right now. In 2022, the UN General Assembly formally adopted a resolution recognizing a clean, healthy environment as a human right.
A massive milestone, because it acknowledges the reality of how environmental degradation actually operates.
Which is that pollution and deforestation disproportionately harm poor and politically powerless groups first.
Right. Pollution does not distribute itself equally. It follows the path of least political resistance.
Exactly. When a chemical plant needs to dump toxic waste, they don't put it in the wealthy, politically connected neighborhoods.
No, they put it where the land is cheapest and the residents have the least political capital to fight back.
Indigenous communities, poor neighborhoods, they always absorb the physical cost of industrial progress.
So treating environmental harm as a justice issue is a massive leap in human civilizational capability. It's not just about saving trees. It's about stopping the powerful from offloading their toxic byproducts onto the powerless.
But as we expand this network, we have to ask, what happens when the router itself glitches?
What are the trade-offs and limitations of the systems we've built? Because the source material does not romanticize justice.
No, it is very realistic about the flaws.
Systems can become bureaucratic, slow, unequal, or overly punitive.
Courts can be captured by politics. Anti-corruption efforts can be weaponized.
Let's talk about those ethical tensions. And maintaining strict political neutrality here, as the text does, we're looking at these purely as structural dilemmas.
The constant friction in the system.
For instance, the tension between security and liberty. To protect the public from violence, a society gives its police and surveillance apparatus power.
But the more power you grant the state to maintain security, the more you infringe on the fundamental liberty of the individual.
Right. Or the tension between free speech and protection from harm. We value the absolute right to express ideas, but what happens when those ideas incite violence?
Or equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome.
These aren't equations you can just solve with math.
No, they are continuous, exhausting societal negotiations.
So I have to pose a serious dilemma to you based on this. If we know the courts can be biased, if we know that bureaucracy can be dehumanizing, if we know the tools of justice can be weaponized, how do we actually trust the system?
It's the ultimate question.
Right. Why should any citizen engage in good faith with a system that openly admits it is glitchy?
Because the philosophy of the text says we must hold two truths at once.
Two truths.
The first truth is that systems fail, they are corrupted, and they are deeply imperfect. The second truth is that these same imperfect systems are still improving lives dramatically.
Holding both in your head at the same time?
Yes. An imperfect court is better than revenge killing.
Oh, absolutely.
A biased institution that can be legally challenged is infinitely better than absolute power that cannot be questioned.
The goal isn't to pretend the system is pure.
Precisely. The failures of the system are not a reason to abandon it. They are a diagnostic report telling us where the next patch needs to be applied.
I think that is the most vital takeaway for anyone listening to this right now. Your modern life is absolutely packed full of inherited progress.
Things we take completely for granted.
The fact that you have the ability to appeal a decision, or vote, or criticize your leaders. None of that is natural.
It is an inheritance.
Yes, an inheritance purchased through the immense sacrifice of whistleblowers, activists, and ordinary people who decided to run their leg of the relay race.
Which brings us to a perfect summary of our journey today.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. We started by looking at human society as a brutal, buggy operating system governed by raw power.
We explored how our biological sensitivity to unfairness generated the moral discomfort necessary to write the patch notes of history.
We broke down the grueling relay race required to translate raw empathy into hard, enforceable institutions.
We examined the psychological traps of outrage and cynicism that make progress invisible.
And we watched the moral circle expand outward to the environment itself. The core journey here is that justice is not a finished monument.
No, it is a living discipline.
The goal is not to shame the past, but to understand it honestly, blending gratitude for inherited progress with the responsibility to maintain it.
Ultimately, civilization isn't defined by our technology or our wealth. It is defined by our ability to intentionally restrain our own power and treat each other better than before.
It's the capacity to climb. But before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final unmentioned thought to mull over on your own.
The next frontier.
Exactly. We've seen the moral circle expand from property-owning classes to all humans to the environment itself. But as we build increasingly autonomous artificial intelligence that makes decisions affecting human lives...
Which is happening right now?
Right now.
Right.
Will our current justice systems be capable of holding non-human intelligence accountable? Who gets the blame when an algorithm causes harm? And how will the definition of who counts have to expand next? Something to think about. Until next time.